Today's forum is part of a program tracking what we're calling the Education Equation. It's being sponsored by Columbus State Community College, represented by the Chief of Staff of Columbus State Community College, Kim Hall, and her colleagues, and Columbus State Community College Foundation, represented by Pam Bishop and her colleagues. Please thank them for their support of today's event. Now I'd like to welcome Kim to the microphone to introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Good afternoon and welcome. Columbus State and the Columbus State Development Foundation are delighted to sponsor today's forum, and we're especially excited to partner with the Columbus Metropolitan Club to sponsor education forums here for the next 12 months. We are seeing unprecedented collaboration among leaders in K-12 education, higher education, and the business community. And it is extremely encouraging to witness this community emerge as a national leader in building a cohesive regional strategy towards college completion and career success. We are honored today to have 4 distinguished guests with us to further the dialogue. A biography for each speaker is in your forum flyer, and so I will provide only brief introductions. Our first panelist has had a long and successful career of service and leadership in Columbus as Columbus City Attorney and as a Franklin County Municipal Court Judge. Since 2003, she has served as President and CEO of United Way of Central Ohio. Please welcome Janet Jackson. Our second panelist has also held key positions in public service as the Chancellor for the Board of Regents and State Senator for Ohio's 25th State Senate District. He is presently the Vice President for Education and STEM Learning at Battelle, and he serves as the Director of the Columbus Education Commission. Please welcome Eric Fingerhut. Our third panelist is the founding pastor of the Church for All People, located on the south side of Columbus, and he's also the director of the Community Development for All People nonprofit faith-based organization. He has led a diverse congregation at the Church for All People, including individuals who most desperately need the support of our community. Please welcome Pastor John Edgar. And finally, our moderator studies many of the complex issues we'll be discussing today and at future forums. She is the executive director of the nationally renowned Kirwan Institute for the study of race and ethnicity at OSU. Please welcome Sharon Davies. On behalf of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, Columbus State Community College, and the Columbus State Community College Development Foundation, thank you so much again for coming. And at this time, I'll turn the mic over to Janet.
Good afternoon. Oh, that's weak. Good afternoon. I was just explaining to a couple of folks who were trying to understand my stamina that I'm sure it goes back to my roots of growing up in the South and on a farm. And in the South, we are always about greeting folks, and so I'm afraid that's just part of who I am. Thank you, Kim, for the introduction, and thank you to Columbus State Community College for supporting the work of the Metropolitan Club and for sponsoring us today. And thank you for having us back to share this information with you today. In order to fully understand the state of education in our community and how to effectively improve it, we must understand the factors and history that have created the current conditions. And one of those most significant factors would be our neighborhoods. This is the focus of the 2013 Franklin County Children's Report, Why Neighborhoods Matter to Education. Developed by the United Way's Champion of Children, thank you, Linda Cass, and all of United Way, and the Kirwan Institute for Race and Ethnicity and Community Research Partners, and congratulations to their new exec. Thank you for coming together for this organization. And I have to say a really special thank you to the Kirwan Institute and the Sharon Davies. We have found a new wonderful partner in our work. So the report looks at key decisions over the past several decades that have had tremendous effects on neighborhoods and schools. It explores some neighborhood revitalization efforts in at-risk neighborhoods here in Central Ohio. It also illustrates that safe, vibrant neighborhoods and high-quality education are strongly linked. The report shows the power of holistic approach to education, and the best national example of that is the Harlem Children's Zone. Much can be learned from the Harlem Children's Zone, and we were extremely fortunate to have heard directly from Geoffrey Canada, its president, in February at the 20th anniversary of Champion of Children. I see a number of people here today that were among the audience of more than 600 individuals who attended that event. Taking the time to understand all aspects of our children's education and taking a holistic approach to improving it was the idea behind Mayor Coleman's and City Council President Andy Ginther's Columbus Education Commission. I was extremely proud to serve on the commission, and we were so fortunate to have its director, Eric Fingerhut, on both serving as the director and serving on our panel today. You need to give him a round of applause. As you know, the Commission's recommendations have now been made, and it is time for our community to come together and implement them. And I don't know if Eric was going to share this during the Q&A, and so if you've got something to write something down, you can go online and get the report and read it. And I really, really, really encourage you to do it. It's not overwhelming unless you look at all of the things in the appendix. You go to Reimagine Columbus Education. Reimagine ColumbusEducation.org. Please take the time to do it. If you're like me, you're going to have to download it so you can mark it up, but it is worth your time to do that. So as we go about implementing it, the report, the recommendations, we must understand the dynamics of where we are today and the best practices that already exist. So that's why I believe that the Franklin County Children's Report is the perfect companion piece to the Commission's recommendation. And so again, I think today you're just going to receive the executive summary of the report, but again, you can go online and get the entire report. It may not, I don't know if you want it as bedtime reading, but please read the two, reports. It's really, really important for the future of our children. Because I believe that taken together, these two important documents tell us very clearly where we have been and where our community needs to go to ensure that every child, and I do mean every child in Central Ohio, gets a high-quality education that gives them the opportunities they need to reach their potential. Let me give you a little bit of a warning about our report and maybe a little bit from the education report. I was reading our full report just last night, and you're going to see a lot of information in that report about the current status of our children as it relates to the issue of poverty. Do not become overwhelmed by those numbers. Poverty is simply not an excuse for our children not succeeding in school. We have example after example. So we're providing you the data that you need to know. You need to understand the challenges that we have before us, but again, it's not an excuse. So I'll end by telling you that even though we have a lot of work to do to improve education, I have never been more hopeful. Through my participation on the Columbus Education Commission, and I certainly hope to be a part of the implementation of the recommendations, and in my role as President and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio, I see that our community has the will to come together and to improve our schools. As we have proven time and time again, Central Ohio is a community that gets things done. And I believe we are now determined to ensure that the education our children receive is among the best in the country. So now I am pleased to turn the podium over to our moderator, Sharon Davies, Executive Director of the Kirwan Institute.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have the easiest job of the group, and I only have to moderate this wonderful conversation that we can have here today. I have the unenviable task, though, of keeping us on time, because I've been told that we want to leave about 15 minutes for questions from the room, and so we will talk amongst ourselves for about 30 minutes until 1 o'clock, and then we'll open it up for discussion. The Children's Report is an important community gift, really, as was the visit of Geoff Canada, who was brought to Columbus, and so many of you wonderfully had an opportunity to see him when he was here in February, brought here by United Way and The Ohio State University. One of the things that Geoff Canada really stressed that has stayed in my mind since he was here is that this is actually not rocket science. This is actually something that we know how to do. And in fact, if we just look at the children in our community who are thriving, and we look at what it is that surrounds their lives that enables them to thrive in the way in which they do, in the way in which we want all of our children from Franklin County to thrive, we can see the components of that. At the Kirwan Institute, we talk about that in structural terms. We refer to the structures that surround each and all of our lives, particularly when we are children, as being enormously important to either opening up pathways to opportunity or creating impediments to opportunity. Some of us are tremendously fortunate to be surrounded by opportunity structures that are operating in a way that really help us to succeed or move towards success in life. And so when you think about that structurally, what we're talking about are structures like high-performing schools or low-performing schools, the importance of access to healthcare facilities while you're a child and health may be impacting your household in one way or the other, the importance of safe streets outside of your home, safe parks or playgrounds for you to play in, or the devastating impact that unsafe streets or unsafe playgrounds can actually have on one's ability just to get exercise or make one's way from your home to your school. The importance of stable and affordable housing. Stable so that if your housing is stable, you can be stably connected to a school nearby, hopefully one that is high performing. But we know that we are not evenly distributed or situated among this web of structures that are so important to life success. So this is why I was so excited to be able to be involved with United Way this year when United Way decided to focus on the important link between neighborhoods and communities and academic outcomes and academic success. And that is really a synopsis of the focus of this year's report. So Gina, I really wanted to start with you and to have you talk to us a little bit more about this link and how it is that you see not just the importance of schools and what's happening within the school system itself, the four walls, but what's happening outside of those four walls that makes such an impact on young children's lives.
He's not in the room today, but I have to give credit to a board member who just left us in March, Tony White. Many of you may remember him as a former OSU basketball player, and I think he still does commentary. And currently he's the managing partner of Thompson Hine. When our board was trying to decide on our bold goals back in 08, 09, Tony was the board member who spoke so eloquently on the importance of including home as one of our 4 impact areas. He made it, he was wonderful, and we are probably the only United Way in the country that has this particular piece carved out. But Tony shared with us, you know, we can afford children the best early childhood education. We can make sure that they're healthy. We can really work on ensuring that their parents make enough money for decent living. But if they can't come home to a structure that itself is safe and sound. The actual building, the quality of where they stay, and the issues that are there, whether it's lead or other things. And if they don't have the ability to come out to their street, to their backyards, to go into their playgrounds, they simply will not thrive. It has to be one of those critical pieces. And so our work is around trying to ensure, and it's rather daunting work, because I don't know if we've counted how many neighborhoods need the type of interventions that we've had at Wineland Park, or now as we move to the south side. And I'm having some conversations with folks in the room and partnering, of course, with OSU and the PAC on the Near East side. Unfortunately, we have many communities in Columbus where children don't have the ability to do exactly as what I just said. But it's a fundamental right that every child has, and we're getting it right. I mean, again, if you look at what's going on in Wineland Park, there are so many partners that are there. I would remind you that not so many years ago, Wineland Park was neighborhood to the Short North Posse, the most notorious drug gang. But when you look at whether it's Godmanville, the Settlement House, and OSU, and so many other folks, and most importantly, including the individuals who live in the neighborhood, including the parents. This is not a situation where we can just come in and say, we're going to fix it for you. They must be there. And we also must make sure that when we go through this revitalization of a neighborhood, that those residents can stay. This is not a situation where we're going to push them out. And so it's just critical, again, to, so when you read the report, I mean, look at those poverty numbers and look at what those children have to face, and then say, one way we're going to address that is to very systematically, neighborhood by neighborhood, revitalize them.
Okay, so when I think about what Janet has just said, it occurs to me that what she's describing and what we can see from the historical sketch that is involved in the full-blown report that was generated this year is that communities and neighborhoods are dynamic. They change, and they sometimes change in ways that improve them, but also displace people who would benefit from those improvements, including children, if we could just create the kinds of interventions that would allow those families to be stably located in improving neighborhoods. So it's a big part of what United Way is focused on with the Wineland Park work that is going on now. And Reverend, I want to come to you because you are also doing real hands-on, and I would describe it as holistic work with residents of the South Side, and ask you to help us understand this a little bit better and why it's so important to think about this holistically and not just as what is happening within the four walls of a school building.
Sure. The good news, as has already been indicated, is there are some great examples right now across Columbus of revitalization efforts that are working. A lot of attention being given to Wineland Park, you've alluded to. And there are two of these initiatives right now going on the south side of Columbus that are trying to take the best practices that have been emerging. One of those is an initiative that's just to the south of Nationwide Children's Hospital called Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families, that the hospital has been the key anchor institution to promote. And based largely on the success of that venture in Wineland Park, there's now a second initiative, what's known as the Southern Gateway Collaborative, that Mayor Coleman's championed after the close of the Southside Settlement House, where the United Way and others have been key players. But in response to your question, if you look at those two illustrations, along with Wineland Park, there's some things that stand out very clearly. One is that they all focus on very clearly defined geographical areas. The Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families area is just 31 square blocks. The Southern Gateway Initiative is just 50 square blocks. So it's very precise geography, but then it's a very broad range of services, as the other folks have already alluded to. Yes, it is what happens in the schools, that does matter, but alongside that, housing is a key component. And so, for example, with the Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families Initiative, there are about 400 homes in that total area. And when we got started, a partnership between the nonprofit I run and Nationwide Children's Hospital with United Way, City of Columbus, what we said was we wanted to acquire and redevelop every single vacant blighted property in the community. And at that time, about 1 out of every 4 homes was vacant and blighted. So we went to work, and now, just 4 years later, we're at a place where the vacancy rate has been cut by, at this point, just over 50%, which is actually the bold goal that was established by United Way. And at the same time that was going on, there was a decision to help existing homeowners. Because a lot of these folks had hung in during very difficult times, and so grants have been made now to about 50 homeowners to help them improve their properties. And so we get a sense where the whole neighborhood looks better, there's less blight, and it makes it more walkable, it makes it a place where neighbors are more likely to come out onto their front porches. And all that's happening, and as the report indicates, because there's what the report calls collaborative reinvestment, this notion that no one entity can do it all. So in the case of Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families, it is Nationwide Children's Hospital that clearly has taken the lead, but then that became a trigger for the United Way to pick this as a target neighborhood in its new initiative on housing. The city of Columbus was remarkable in a variety of ways. And so those partners on housing kept things going, but it doesn't even stop there. In that particular initiative, Nationwide Children's Hospital has more than 100 employees who are mentoring students right now at the Lincoln Elementary School that's in this target area. In fact, the school was selected as the epicenter. When we did the very first houses, we did the blocks right around the school and then radiated outward from there. And as all that was going on, there's an emphasis on health and wellness, the notion that if people don't have jobs, then stability is also shattered. And so all these parts came together to make this work. And now it's being replicated in this second target neighborhood known as the Southern Gateway. And what's fascinating to me about this second area is that along with all these other folks in terms of collaborative reinvestment, we're now seeing people who grew up on the South Side, have been very successful in their business careers, and deciding that they are determined to improve quality of life on the very streets where they grew up. And so there are folks like the Grody family, and Jane Grody-Abel's here today, and Don Kelly, and Tanny Crane. And they are literally investing millions of their own dollars alongside the United Way that was a lot of the inspiration for drawing them in. And then the city of Columbus and others. And a flagship in this, as just one additional illustration, is what's known as the Reeb Community Center. The elementary school in that neighborhood closed a number of years ago, the Reeb School, and there are references to that in this report as well, that trend. But there was a decision after the Southside Settlement House closed and collapsed a lot of the basic human services in that neighborhood to regroup. And so private donors and the city are pooling about half and half, $5 million each roughly, to redo this building as a community center that will have as its foundation early childhood education with the Southside Learning and Development Center, will include job training and readiness, and also provide direct services as basic as a daily lunch program so that we begin to meet these various needs. And then one other thing that I would mention, I believe there's a unique role in all of this type of initiative for very grassroots organizations, neighborhood associations, the traditional civics, but also faith-based groups and others, such as the one that I run. Because it is ultimately about building trust with the people who are already there. We began 14 years ago on the South Side just providing direct services to very poor individuals. We see more than 25,000 different low-income folks every year come through our doors. And over the time, just staying and building relationships, there's now trust that we can reach out and do these other things. And that allows it all to work together. And then the point that each of you already made, that I think the report highlights and that we just have to own, is we can deceive ourselves and say we won when a neighborhood looks better. But if all we did was gentrify the neighborhood, and if we really, in the process of making it better so that the children there would have a safe neighborhood and all the rest, but in the process, we drove those kids out of the neighborhood, then we have actually taken a step back rather than a step forward. And to me, what is worth celebrating as much as anything else is this report names that truth. And now that we've named it, we can face it. And things such as what Nationwide Children's Hospital and these donors are doing are committed to keep the folks there that serve the kids that need it most.
Sharon, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
And this is just around empowering the residents. So this is something you may not know that, in a way, United Way has been doing for years. We have a neighborhood partnership center where we've been teaching classes on important skills to residents for years. But just this last year, we created the Neighborhood Leadership Academy and just graduated their first class. So these are folks who live in the neighborhoods that we're talking about. And it's really in-depth training for them that teaches them the key skills that they need to identify and to map community assets and to manage projects. It creates connections between the leaders. And so many times those individuals have been sort of overlooked, but they're there. They are this generation of leaders for the communities, and the next. But sometimes they just, again, they need that basic skill development or training. I personally went to the graduation this year. It was awesome. These are folks who are ready to go back to these neighborhoods and to use that skill, and they're staying there.
And so we can clearly get a sense of the depth of the community commitment that is here that we can tap into, and that is so important. But, when I hear, Janet, you saying things to the crowd like, don't get overwhelmed by the poverty numbers, or my conversation with you, Eric, before we began, and you talking to me about the reality of the grim statistics that we're talking about, and you, Reverend Edgar, to talk about how we need to start small and then radiate outward. This sounds really big. And the word holistic, too, that whole approach makes it feel like what we are talking about is an enormous endeavor. One of the things that struck me when Geoff Canada was here, when he was talking about the complexity, really, of the effort that we are talking about, was that what we don't fully appreciate is we don't appreciate how much we're investing right now, only we're investing in failure, rather investing in pathways to success. So Eric, I want to bring you into this conversation, having just directed the work of the Education Commission, to speak a little bit about your experience with that and some of the most important takeaways that we should be thinking about right now.
Well, thank you, Sharon. And Janet, thank you for your service on the Commission for this incredibly timely report. And don't worry, you're not off the hook on implementation. You're going to be right at the table. And I also want to really acknowledge and thank both Mayor Coleman and Council President Andy Ginther. Andy's here today for their extraordinary leadership. This was not just them creating a commission and then walking away from it and waiting for a report. They have been deeply engaged in this from day one, and they, of course, remain deeply engaged in the implementation. So please, let's share our thanks for the So one of the things that Mayor Coleman said during the course of the commission work, which took me a little bit by surprise because I haven't lived in Columbus my whole life, as you know, is he said that the public outreach effort that the commission conducted was the single largest effort that he's organized on any issue since he's been mayor. That public outreach effort, which was led by Kathleen Murphy, who's here, included public meetings, open meetings, focus groups, social media, websites, Twitter feeds, 100,000 postcards that we placed all around the community, ads encouraging people to send us their ideas, the website that Janet mentioned earlier. And out of all that, Sharon, I have to tell you that the number one piece of public input was, we want you to strengthen schools in our neighborhoods. It was the link between education and neighborhoods. So the topic of this report, Janet, is something that the people of this community already get. They get the link between a high-quality school and a high-quality neighborhood. And I just want to share with you, because you can read this yourself, at page 52 of the report says, we're talking about creating quality schools. It says, while more high-quality school choices are important, parents in Columbus rightly demand more, not deserve, demand more. They want a high-performing school for their children in their neighborhood. When children are able to attend school closer to home, it's easier for them to build friendships in the neighborhood, which contributes to community safety and well-being, improving housing values and the attractiveness of the neighborhood. It's also easier for parents to be involved in their neighborhood school. You hear about parent involvement. We're sending how parents can be involved when their kids are in 6 different schools that are, in entirely different directions, and they're working, from 7 in the morning till 5 at night. So this was something that was really brought home to the commission. Now, how did we address it? I'm going to mention 5 things quickly. Don't be daunted by 5. I promise it'll be quick. First of all, we also say in the report, on the next page, one of the most noteworthy developments during the commission was the commitment and energy of parent-led, neighborhood-based organizations advocating for improvements in their neighborhood schools. If you're paying attention, all over this community, groups like Clintonville Go Public, Southside Stay, Northwest Stars, Linden, they're popping up, these parent organizations that are advocating for better schools. So one thing the report does is recommend, you'll hear more later about a public-private partnership, a new organization, Think Columbus 2020 for Education. And one of the jobs of that organization is going to be to support those groups and help create those groups in neighborhoods that don't have them forming indigenously, so that there's a neighborhood voice on their school. And that leads to number 2, which is a central theme of the report, is that the decision about schools has to be made at the school level. The one thing we've learned across the country is that school quality is at the school level. The principal leadership, the pedagogical design, the theme of the school, and it has to be tied in to that neighborhood. So we've recommended a pretty sweeping decentralization of the Columbus City School District so that the principals and the teachers in the school can interact with the neighborhood in building the school that they desire in their community. Third, a strong emphasis on the need to make sure students are not just college